40 years ago, I was 18 years old and I needed a summer job to pay for school. And I really didn't have a plan. I didn't have any expectation that I was going to build a business, that I was going to be self-employed. I really had no intentional direction. I did know that I was physically able to do the work, and I had a little bit of experience with landscaping. So my next door neighbor, George, and I went literally knocking on all of our neighbors' doors and scrounged up work for that first summer and kept ourselves busy and made decent money and had lots of fun and paid for school and a little bit of beer for Friday nights. So that was a lot of fun. And school is 4 years, so it was kind of a commitment, at least for the time we were in school. And what we found was we really enjoyed it. We got better at what we did. We made more money. We got better jobs. We started hiring employees in that second summer, and it became a business sort of almost unintentionally. And in 1989, that was the summer when we were finished with school. And we said, well, let's see where this goes. Let's give it a year and see what we can do as a proper business. And so that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, so you used it to get through school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was that like, working in the summer, managing your school with, the business?
Well, there wasn't a lot of overlap with the business and school. In the fall, we had to wrap up some receivables and we had to do our taxes in the winter, and we were doing some sales in the spring before we started up again, before we were finished school. But it was a pretty clear separation between our work at school and our work in the summer with our business. But, that changed a little bit as the business became a little more mature. And we had employees, so we had to sell more in the winter to prepare for the spring. But it was fun. It was still lots of fun, and I don't think it was. We probably would have done a better job at school if we didn't have the business, and we would have done a better job at business if we didn't have to be at school. But I think it was a great experience. Starting with those struggles, maybe with those constraints on how we could run it, made us more efficient at the choices we made. We didn't have time to waste with, a lot of meaningless jobs or extra paperwork. We really had to do the bare minimum because we had so many other things that we had to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And when you were going through school, it wasn't the goal to, maybe have a lifetime as a landscape business owner. Or was it?
I know my motivation. Somewhere in the background, I did have a feeling that I wanted to build things. I wanted to design things and I wanted to build things. I always thought it would be houses or buildings. And I was surprised. I didn't know that landscaping could be so interesting and rewarding. And I found after 4 years of landscaping that I was designing and building and solving problems for customers. And I was doing it in a way that I didn't expect. So that part was kind of exciting and fun. But even then, I still wasn't sure that it would be a career for 40 years. I certainly didn't expect it to be a 40-year career. I thought it was fun at the time and I could make money, and I did want to make as much as I could. But to what end, I didn't know at the time. I didn't have a vision. We didn't have, a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan. There was no deliberate intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just kind of fell into it, but it sounds like at the beginning when you were first doing it, maybe as the business was growing, sounds like it was just a really fun and exciting process.
Yeah. And we were kids, and we had lots of friends in the neighborhood. So those first few years, all of our employees were friends of ours, neighbors and people I went to school with. And these were my peers, and we would all work together during the day, and we'd go out at night and we'd have fun together. It was like being at camp sometimes. And, doing work was just a different way of having more fun. And, I think maybe some of that has carried through the idea that work can be something that you do with your staff. Even today, 40 years later, we still try to respect our coworkers as equals. We try to have fun while we're at work. We try to, push each other to do better, and to do better personally and to do better professionally. So I think that still carries through maybe some of our culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that same kind of energy 40 years later is still there.
Yeah, there's a lot of younger people in the company now, people that are young like I was then, people that are coming into this business that maybe don't have their vision for themselves, don't know what they want to do for a career. And I I do want to help them see the opportunity in a career in this industry. I think it's great. And there have been some people who have come to Oriole Landscaping who are not landscape professionals, who find a groove that they really excel at, and they can have fun doing it, and they can express their creativity, their ambition, they can meet needs, financial needs if they strive and achieve leadership success or skills success. They can really make good money in this industry as well. So, yeah, it is still fun, and there's still lots of people coming through that same process from different directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm wondering about kind of that decision that you ended up making that, okay, at first it was something that was fun that you were doing to get through school, but that you were really passionate about at the same time. And then there was a point where, I guess a decision had to be made. I guess this is going to be my career now. What was that like for you?
Yeah, there was, in Canada, there was a deep recession in 1990. Approximately the same time we started doing the business year round full time. And that was maybe a mixed blessing. It was unfortunate because it was hard to make money. And it was fortunate that we hadn't already built a business with a lot of overhead. So we were able to muscle through that recession just by working harder and sustaining our business through brute force. And it was probably 3 or 4 years of hard work, grinding in the trenches to do the jobs and sell the jobs. And we weren't charging enough. That's why we were still getting work. And that became frustrating. 3 or 4 years of just hard work and making mediocre money became a little tiresome. And George and I made a decision to charge more so we could make more, or go out of business, raise our prices and go out of business if we couldn't get work for what we thought we were worth. And that was probably 1994. And lo and behold, we kept selling work. People continued to hire us. We started making better money. We started realizing what potential we had. We started hiring better employees because we could afford to pay more. We were able to do better work. So, 1995, 1996, we thought we actually had the potential to do really good work. And that was 1996 was the year we joined Landscape Ontario, our provincial association for landscapers, which was another level of awareness of what's possible for our industry, what's possible for us, what's possible for the business, and education on how to do landscaping, education on how to run a business. There were some great speakers at the Landscape Ontario events that described our struggles and described solutions for those struggles. And it was transformational for George and I. So 1996 to 2006, probably, there's a good 10-year stretch there. We started showing at Canada Blooms, the flower and garden show. We got great jobs. We grew the company a lot. We were making good money. We were charging decent money. And it was pretty exciting. And by 2006, we kind of felt like we had figured out a good system. And that was about the same time we started doing our own speaking engagements, talking to other landscapers about our experience and what we learned and our struggles along the way. And that was sort of the beginning for Knowledge Tree Consulting.
Okay, cool. And, in landscaping, a lot of owners get trapped working in the business instead of working on the business. I'm wondering when that shift happened for you, and how you finally put down the tools to become, more of a CEO and take on those responsibilities.
Yeah, there was a slow transition over those 10 years, 96 to 2006. We remembered the pain of 1990 and that recession and the struggle of the challenge of having enough work. And so in our growth period, we deliberately chose to grow the company so that we could have a buffer, essentially. We could have where George and I didn't have to work in the job site, that George and I weren't physically required to do all of the landscape work. We felt that was a liability for our company, where if my back went out and I couldn't produce, and that's how my company was built to operate, that it would jeopardize the company. So we made a choice to grow the company so that I didn't have to be on the tools. George had a similar, epiphany where he could become more of a manager, a salesperson, an executive in a larger company, so that, again, his body wasn't necessary for the business to be viable. And so it was probably 2006, where we felt like we'd found our groove. We had one of George's relatives gave us some sage advice, and he said, the next step is for us we've removed ourselves from the job site, but the next level of improvement as leaders is to become the least needed person in the office. And George really took that to heart, and he brought that back into the office and shared it with me and some of the rest of the team. And it really did become a mantra for several years. And that was, part of that growth of understanding our role and how we could serve the company better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And so how many years do you feel like it took for you to, properly step into the CEO role? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it was very subtle. George and I co-led the company for many years, and it might have been in the early 2000s. So what is that? We were working for 15 years before George's role and my role really became more clearly separated, where we were both doing sales still. As owners, we were still the best two sales persons, but our roles had separated a little bit more, where George was working more in operations and I was working more in the executive function in the office. And as we sort of became better at each of those roles, the role of CEO, I wasn't limited to CEO. I was still wearing many hats, So I wasn't a proper CEO, but it was still having to make those decisions that a CEO makes. And
Mm-hmm.
again, at that time, I was, 20 years younger than I am now. I still didn't really understand the value of CEO thinking. And the problem I was still experiencing then is I didn't know how to take off my other hats and look at things purely as a CEO. I was still muddled in, having so many hats on. I was trying to do sales and be CEO and be chief financial officer and human resource motivator, and trying to do all of those things simultaneously is very difficult, and none of them get done well enough to be effective. So it still took some time to understand the importance of each of those roles individually, and give them each the attention they needed. And that's something that it took many years to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was a real kind of growth journey and figuring it out as you go.
We hired some consultants, probably in early 2000s. We hired a consultant who, you know, he broke it down more operationally, but it was still very interesting for us to look at things critically from that perspective. And we really hadn't done that before. And that was a turning point for us. We hired another consultant, 5 or 6 years later. And, and the second consultant, we were actually seeking specific advice from this other consultant. So it was, we started to see our limitations in our skill set. We started to see where we needed help, where we could use, better advice to grow. And we started bringing in outside help because we didn't have the experience or the skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much did your business change after you started to, let's say, incorporate some of that advice that you got from maybe that second consultant that was especially helpful?
Yeah, the second consultant in around 2008 or 2009 was more about culture, and what happened with the second consultant when we more clearly defined our culture and our purpose and what a good functioning team looked like. That was about the time we started identifying mavericks in our company. We have prima donnas or mavericks or people that are working outside of a team. Some of them were working against the company culture, and they may have been good at their job, but they were destructive in terms of the company culture, and they would create uncomfortable situations for coworkers. And we would have turnover in our company because people didn't like working with other people. And it took us a little while after that second consultant sort of opened our eyes. It took us a little while to sort of learn how to identify these people, learn how to replace that skill set with people with a good attitude about work who could learn those skills and be effective in those roles. So there's a bit of a rotation in our employment. And once that happened, once we'd sort of built a company around culture, it was much more enjoyable to work at Oriole Landscaping. It was, people could then focus on their job. They could focus on, salespeople could focus on sales. Crews could focus on the work. There wasn't a he said, she said sort of atmosphere, or, the workers against the office, and, all of that tension was gone. And it's such a pleasure to work in an environment where you have support, where we work The office works to support the crews. The crews work to do their work and not against the office, or against our directions or to sabotage our instructions. But they understand the value of doing it properly and they get rewarded for that. So it's so much more productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like that culture change made a huge difference in the company over time.
Yeah. And from 2008 to 2018, the next 10 years, we transformed the culture. George took that advice of being the least needed person in the office to heart. We continued to do speaking engagements and coaching for other companies to the point where George was able to step away from Oriole Landscaping completely because we had fully replaced his tasks at the office and to free him to do his passion, which is consulting, coaching, mentoring other companies. And that's been huge for the rest of the team as well. Creating that culture of movement, giving George an opportunity to promote himself out of the company, makes room for your other leaders to be promoted up into higher levels of management and responsibility, which makes room for your crew leaders to move into supervisory roles and your workers to move into crew leader roles. Creating that constant movement gives people hope, gives people skills to strive for, and it's what defines a career, that progression through your growth as a worker. So I think it's been huge. Like each of those steps, and it doesn't happen quickly. Like a lot of these stories that I'm telling you are 10-year long arcs, but it's, even 2018, that 10-year arc, that was 8 years ago where, George sort of started focusing on consulting. And, so it's, these are long arc stories, and that maybe is a subplot to this whole story. Like Oriole's been in business for 40 years, but it feels like it's, a series of a handful of steps. And, it really doesn't feel like 40 years. It still feels like it's a lot of fun, and it still feels like there's so much more we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. And so another thing that I wanted to ask you about was, 40 years is a long stretch of time. There are huge changes in the economy as the decades come and go. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to how Oriole Landscaping managed through a difficult economic period. And, what is it that helped you guys kind of make it out okay from that?
Yeah, there have been, 1990 was the first and maybe the biggest recession that we were in, but we were least vulnerable because we were so small. 2001, there was the dot-com bubble. 2008 was the financial crisis. There have been some downturns and COVID in 2020. These are pretty big shocks. And excluding 1990, when we were just too stupid to realize that we were working for $3 an hour and we should do something else. Other than that, I'd say by the time we got to 2001, we had built a company that was a proper business. Thankfully, we had learned at some of those presentations at Landscape Ontario the importance of financial statements, understanding a financial statement, understanding a balance sheet, and the value of building a balance sheet, building equity in your balance sheet, which insulates you from some economic shocks so that you're not vulnerable. If everything is borrowed money and there's a brief downturn in revenue, it's going to be very difficult to make all your payments. So having some equity on your balance sheet is a huge advantage when there are economic pullbacks. And additionally, our experience from 1990 to 1994, when we were struggling in a downturn economy, we recognized that the parts of the economy that were still functioning, that worked even in a recession in landscaping, are the high-end, high net worth customers. So we made a point in 94, 95, 96, 97, 98 to pursue those jobs in particular. What do we have to do to attract those types of clients, to pursue those types of jobs, to win those jobs, to do them effectively, to get more of those jobs? And that experience helped us. So come 2000, 2008, we had some big landscape jobs that we were working on that helped bridge some of those economic downturns. We had a year's worth of work booked. We had big jobs with high net worth individuals. So they might have less money, but less, a massive amount of money that is down 10% is still a massive amount of money. So there is some cushion for us for that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you guys looked at the long-term stability of your business pretty strategically from like the early days.
Yeah. At that, by the late 90s, we had a good understanding of what we needed to do to make it a real business. And by that point, we'd been in business for 10 or 15 years, and we pretty much went all in on making Oriole Landscaping a successful business. And it might have been shortly after that we started contemplating an exit strategy, and we started restructuring the business in the early 2000s. And, and that was part of that education that we were getting, to understand that how to build a business that is more attractive to sell or to transition out of, or, to hand off to family. And those were all things we were thinking about in the early 2000s. George and I both had young families at the time, and we had mortgages on our houses. So we were in that sort of middle-aged sweet spot, but definitely with an eye on how the end game looked. And we started planning for that probably 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it becomes pretty complicated, just working high-end jobs, doing high-end projects. That's where, you can get into projects that are over $1 million. And so I'm curious to hear more about what that experience was, working, for really high net worth clients, and like what the jump was, going from small jobs, let's say middle class clients, to ultra high net worth. What was that transition like? How did your business change, and how did that kind of pressure you to change as well as a leader, and even maybe in some ways as a person?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first ultra wealthy clients we worked for, we weren't doing massive jobs for them. We were doing small repair jobs. There's a lot of good landscape companies in our market, and nobody had to hire us. There was plenty of landscapers to choose from. And if you were getting a really big job done in the late 90s, you would hire somebody with experience on really big jobs. But if you needed your patio re-leveled, these big landscape companies might not be interested in doing that because it's a small job. They might not be competitive doing it. George and I were happy to do those jobs. And, a small repair job on a massive property, it's still a pretty good job. And working for these ultra high net worth people showed us that they are normal people. They have, normal expectations. They appreciate quality. They appreciate good value. And that showed us that we could talk to them. We could sell to them. We had our quality and our service was, what they wanted. And we just had to, accept that we were willing to take the risk doing bigger jobs. We had a breakthrough job probably in 2002, a massive job on a massive property with ultra high net worth customer. And we got the work because we had a reputation for doing good quality work, great service. We had high skilled people. I just hadn't done anything that big before. So it was just a matter of doing what we did, in $100,000 increments and doing it on over $1 million piece, like a $2.5 million job. And that was massive. And it was scary. But we projected confidence and we struggled a little bit doing it. But we made it happen. We got it done. We proved to ourselves, we proved to the architects that we were working with that we could do it. And that really opened the door for many more to follow.
So once you landed that job, once you kind of proved yourself to the architects and maybe went even above their expectations, then they trusted you. And then it really kind of paved the way to getting other great jobs.
Yeah. There've been many times in the early 2000s, but before 2008, like up until 2007, there was literally an explosion of work. There was so much work and so much money out there that big successful companies were booked. They were busy. They were booked. They could charge what they wanted. They could get work, which left the door open for companies like Oriel to come in and scoop up some of the secondary jobs, massive still, and there was still lots of money, but we were available. We weren't booked as far ahead. We weren't as expensive as some of the top tier companies at the time. And that really opened the door and gave us an opportunity to work on some fantastic projects at the time.
Mm-hmm. And by fantastic, you mean like just the design was incredible and really eye-opening that way?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Great jobs. Like award-winning, photo-worthy, like all, it was a lot of fun to work on some of these jobs. Challenging, professionally challenging. It tested every skill that we had. It tested our team, but it was very rewarding. Sometimes the harder the struggle, the greater the victory. So.
Okay. And I'm wondering, Oriel Landscaping did a lot of design build stuff internally. And so what was it like, working for these high-end jobs, maybe gaining inspiration and then taking some of that back to your own design office? Can you just speak a bit more about that experience and your headspace as you went through that?
Yeah, and I feel like I have a designer's perspective when I'm looking at work. I enjoy working for architects that are good architects, good designers. They, they see things and they create things that are fantastic, things that I wouldn't have thought of. And I really enjoy being able to build those things. The thought process to come up with that interesting solution is something I can also do, and I might come up with a different solution, but I really enjoy the opportunity to come up with those solutions to, wow clients with, just like I get wowed when I'm working on a great architect's project and they have some spectacular details. I love doing that for my customers and getting that same reaction from the customer where they see something that we build that, they hadn't thought of, but, we make sure that we design properly, we build it beautifully, and then, the customer is, surprised or awestruck at the end. And that's totally rewarding. So I think it's a thought process, the idea of being a good designer. Now, we still don't get the biggest jobs to design internally. Generally, the design build jobs we get are the next level below what the architects are getting. The architects currently are drawing jobs that are over $1 million, $1 million to 10 million for residential landscapes. Our design build office, we've done a few that are over $1 million, but most of our design build work is under $1 million. So we're not necessarily competing directly with the architects, but we get to apply a lot of those lessons that we get from working on those fantastic projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what would you say to a landscape business owner that wants to, elevate their brand, elevate their designs? How do they go through that process of, kind of maybe doing not necessarily low end, but more towards the moderate budget kind of work versus, doing work that inspires awe? What's that leap like? And
right.
What needs to be done?
Yeah, it's a chicken and the egg question. Do you have to do the good work first in order to win more good work? Or do you have to design it first? How do you get those good jobs if you haven't done any of those good jobs? Who's going to hire you first? And I think it's similar to my experience where it's very incremental. You do good work on, modestly priced jobs, but do good detailed work. Make sure your miters are tight and your bricks are level. That's simple stuff. When you do planting, make sure your plants are healthy and the project is cleaned up before you take your pictures at the end of the project. You want to make it look like it's a high value experience for that client, and you can sell those details, and that's scalable. Good quality detail is scalable to a large project. If all of the details are at that level of excellence on a big job, then it's sold. But how do you get those big jobs? Well, you have to convince them that you're trustworthy, that you have the capability to do the work. You have to, incrementally take a job that's 50% bigger than you've ever done before, or 25% bigger than you've ever done before. And at that point, it's scaling what you've proven is possible. And proving to yourself that that's possible gives you confidence, gives your staff confidence to go after a bit more and a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And when it comes to your staff in the company, sometimes taking on bigger projects and even looking to grow your business, it takes a team. And you spoke to, how significant the culture change was in your own business. So I'm wondering if you could share anything about hiring and employee retention and culture building strategies that really worked for you that might help other business owners.
No, that's key. We used to hire for skill. We used to look for people who could do the work that I did or George did. We need to hire somebody because we want to do more jobs. We have to just hire clones of ourselves. And hiring clones is problematic in that they aren't going to be exactly like you. And you're still going to be missing some of those skills that you're missing. I'm not good at everything. And if I just get more of me, I'm going to have a company filled with people who can't do that stuff that I can't do. And what we discovered is it's much better to hire for what you're missing in your company, what the gaps are in your company in terms of skill, and also to focus first and foremost on attitude. So you hire people with a good attitude about work and aptitude to learn, and they can fill all of those spaces in your company that is missing right now. And if they've got a good attitude, then as a team, you're going to find a way to work together. They're going to select, complementary tasks, and, you work better as a team. You can't all be on the left wing. When you're on a hockey team, it has to be somebody on the right wing. So you don't want a clone, you want somebody complementary. And that's something that we discovered, is attitude is most important, and complementary skills is more important than finding people that are just like you.
Yeah. So clearly defining kind of the roles that are needed in the team to then find the right players to fill those roles.
Yeah. And that extended to the office. Like, as we got bigger and we had to hire people for the office, it was much easier to identify gaps in our skill set and to hire people to fill those gaps in the office. Because the office, George and I definitely had the most gaps in our administration. So, bookkeeper, designer, accountant, all of these things, those are the things that were very easy for us to identify as a gap and hire specifically for.
Mm-hmm. And, over the past 40 years, it's kind of incredible how much technology has evolved. And so I'm wondering if you could speak about, some of the big tech shifts that, you experienced in your company and how they might have elevated things for everyone.
Yeah, and it's been continual. I can tell you in 1988 or 89, we got a telephone. Panasonic had a telephone called the Transportable, and it weighed about 3 kilograms, and it had a little cord on it and a battery. And it was hilarious. It cost, I think we spent $2,500 to buy the phone in 1988 or 89. And we paid 90 cents a minute to talk on the phone. So it was ridiculously expensive. But so few people had it, we had a strategic advantage with this phone. We were on the job site, we were able to call suppliers, we were able to call staff, we were able to talk to customers, we were able to make sales while on the job site. So this is when we were, still a fledgling company. We had 5 or 6 employees. So we were on the tools a lot. But we had a phone, so we didn't miss any calls. It was, I think we were spending like $2,000 a month on our phone bill. But it was revolutionary in terms of the capacity it gave us. And even at that price, it made us more competitive than our competition because we could do things they couldn't do. And, obviously as everybody catches up, the costs come down. And now everybody does it, so there's no more competitive advantage with cell phones. But, we put our accounting on, we had Simply Accounting on a DOS computer in the early 90s. That made the accounting work more efficiently. So we transitioned to that. Excel was just coming out in the early 90s. So everything was going on spreadsheets. We built a whole estimating program in the late 90s, which was very detailed, similar to what a lot of the programs are doing today in their like LMN. But it was all Excel based estimating. And that gave us an advantage because we were able to have consistent, accurate pricing, and most other people were charging square foot for their landscaping at the time. So it was, those little things, it's kind of comical to think about it as technology, because so many people today were just born with that. But these things continued to evolve. And the internet, our first website, I published in 1996, I believe. It's when we got OrioLandscaping.com. And I remember that first website, the entire website, including pictures, was 2.5 megabytes. and I had these tiny little thumbnail pictures that I could upload. And it still took 30 minutes to upload my website to the internet. And, and it was like, I think it was 4 pages, and it was just a brochure, but it was like, that was revolutionary at the time. I was one of the only people with with a website among my competition. It was a lot of fun. And, it was, but I mean, it's comical again to think about it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like what, all these little things that come that we take for granted now, but it's fun to recall what we came from. The most important technology that we're still using is technology to communicate. So communicating amongst our team, communicating with customers, communicating with potential customers. Communication is really at the heart of running our business. And, there are additional tools like AI that can help you communicate. It can help identify, what you need to do occasionally. It can make you sound a little bit better if you can clean up some emails that you're sending. But really it's the technology to communicate. So your process for, phone calls, emails, texting, your frequency of communications with your customers, the timing of your communication with your staff. Like all of these things are more important than the platform that you use. Getting information from your staff in the early afternoon every day on a regular basis creates a routine, and it gets you the information in time so you can respond to it properly for the following day. Communicating with your customer on a weekly basis so they feel always connected with the company, even if you're just developing a quote or preparing to start on a site. Having regular communication along the way is more important than whether you're communicating by email or text or phone or so in terms of technology, it's, we're adding new pathways to communicate. Now we use Teams or Zoom a lot, so we can video conference with clients, which makes it easier to present, change orders or drawings or details or photos or sharing that kind of information. These are all new things that we're adding constantly, but it's, at the heart of it is about communicating information in a timely manner and with the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's almost like the most important thing is the systems and the standards that you then use the technology for.
Yeah.
And that seems to be maybe even more important than the technology itself.
Yeah. The technology is a tool to execute the system.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And kind of holding all that together is the company culture.
And company culture is the desire to fulfill the mission and to complete the jobs, to follow through with the work, to be accountable for the work. That's our company culture. And it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so my next question here is, after building a successful business for 40 years, what is it that keeps you engaged, and why is it that you decided to jump into consulting as well as an opportunity, instead of maybe just kind of walking away, having done your lifetime of work and maybe just enjoying a retirement by the beach or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the beach does sound nice, but maybe that's good enough for the weekend. What keeps me engaged? I mean, there's still, every day is something new still, and so bringing new staff into the company is exciting because for them everything is new. The excitement of giving them knowledge and skills and seeing them succeed is very rewarding. Consulting is very similar, where we can, meet new people running a business. They might have some struggles in their business. They might have some questions that they don't have answers for. And being able to help them discover those solutions, solve those problems, again, is very rewarding to watch them turn those challenges into opportunities and to have success in their business is very rewarding. In a similar way to, those first summers when we would knock on a door and a customer would say yes to us to hire us for a job. That was very rewarding to get that, positive consequence to our efforts. And it continues today. It's always new. And our growth through the business to the point where we are not needed in the office, the least needed people in the office, to that point where we can afford the time to now look beyond our own company and help other companies to make those similar improvements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like, to you at least, that's even more fun than being at the beach sometimes.
Yeah. No, there's time for the beach. Yeah. Like, and we want that for our clients as well. For all business owners, we want to make sure that they're not, we don't want them working 7 days a week. We don't want them working 100 hours a week. The idea is that you have a system, you have a process that ensures all the work gets done. It's priced properly so you can make decent money without having to spend 100 hours at work. If you can do it in 50 hours or 60 hours, or if it's a young company and you have to put in those extra grunt hours, maybe you're working 70 hours a week. But, that still leaves time to go to the beach. At least, please go and watch the sunset, once in a while. And there's no point in working for the sake of working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a nice message there that, a lot of business owners are kind of stuck thinking that they always have to be thinking about work and trying to solve problems. And it sounds like there is a possibility to, enjoy life at the same time, but to some people it seems almost unattainable. And why do you think that is?
Yeah. In the early 90s, when we were struggling and we were working for $3 an hour, we were working 100 hours a week, and that was the only way we could make a living. And thankfully, we identified that as unsustainable, and we said we have to fix this. And that's what a lot of company owners that call us also have identified, is that they can't keep this up. They've been, killing themselves working and not getting any traction. A lot of the company owners that contact us are struggling because they're working way too many hours and not making enough money. And that's something we want, obviously, to supply them with. It's one of the measures of success, is that A, you can make decent money running a business, and B, you don't have to work 100 hours to do it. So, you can do what you want in your spare time. But I would definitely say stop and do something that is not as demanding. Like going to the beach and watching the sunset is something that does not require, mental, strength. It doesn't require endurance. It doesn't require, it's something that helps you relax. There's, you need to power down occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the clients, in your experience with the clients that you work with, what does the transition look like? Or do you see it a lot that, business owners are stuck kind of scrambling and can't seem to find the time?
Yeah, it is. Again, change takes time. So, even if you know how to do it properly, even if you have a good system, it still takes time to train your staff, to transition your staff. If you have to let some people go and bring some new people on and they get onboarded, it can take a year for somebody to really find their groove at a company. And, so reasonable expectations of that arc of improvement is important, to not be discouraged. Thinking that if only I knew the answer, my life would get easier, is unrealistic if you think it's going to take 2 weeks to fix that problem, or 2 months to turn your life around or your business around. It might take a year. It might take 2 years to fully realize that change in terms of profit for the business, in terms of free time for you to spend with your family. There will be incremental improvements along the way, but to fully realize that transition, it takes time. I have meetings. We had our startup meeting this morning at Oriole Landscaping for the season, and we talk about how far we've come. The change of Oriole from last fall till this spring is small. The change of Oriole from last spring to this spring is a little bit better, but it's still pretty small. But when we look at what Oriole has done over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years, over the last 15 years, those are huge changes in how we improve our business. And we're going to be completely different. 5 years from now, we're going to have more new systems. We're going to have better projects. We're going to have, all of these things are continually changing and improving, but the incremental changes are slow. So understanding that rate of change is important, to not be discouraged. I don't want someone to say it's not worth the effort because I don't see any difference, because the difference is small. So it's hard to see. It's like watching your kids grow. Week to week, it looks like they're not growing, but somehow you have to buy them new clothes every 6 months. So there is change, and even if it's hard to see, and you have to stay vigilant, and you have to be, disciplined, and you will make improvements, and you will make those changes, and you will, if you follow a system, you will be more profitable and you will have more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you engage with businesses through a lot of different ways, one of them peer groups, one of them consulting, one of them coaching, and just seeing these businesses, what do you think, the number one thing is that business owners lack that prevent them from, creating the business and the life that they're really looking for?
Yeah, and it depends on the question. Sometimes they just lack confidence in their approach. So they need validation that is a viable option. So they, in the peer groups, we discuss best practices, and a lot of companies have great ideas. A lot of companies have great ideas, and, maybe they're not pursuing them wholeheartedly because they lack confidence that it's going to be worth their while, and or they don't believe it will pay off. So, you have a policy for lateness, for example. You might have a lateness policy at your company. You have to be on time. But if you don't enforce it, if you're half-heartedly enforcing it, where it's okay to be a little late, and it's okay that Tommy's always late because, it's only Tommy, and if you're doing any of these processes half-heartedly, they're not going to be nearly as effective. And it's going to undermine that culture of continual improvement, because who's going to try and make change if it's not going to be followed through with? Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that the peer groups and the coaching can help with, where we help emphasize the importance of consistency, thoroughness, completeness, and then we can check in on each other, and we can encourage each other to continue and to carry the ball over the finish line. The the end zone, finish line, end zone, mixed metaphors. That's okay. You know what I mean? The, and in consulting, when companies need complete top to bottom renovation of their systems, and we can all afford to have improvement in all of our systems. So if you can afford the time to sit down and to go through all of your systems and to make improvements in all of them simultaneously, it's easier to integrate all of those improvements together. Improving a communication system without improving your HR system or your marketing system, they're not going to fully support each other. You're not going to fully realize those improvements. So doing consulting means that we can address all of those systems simultaneously so that the improvements support each other. And so that's going to be the most effective way to do it. And again, I think even if you get consulting and we make those improvements, it's still helpful to have ongoing contact, again, to ensure that there's follow through, to hold business owners accountable for those improvements so that they don't lose that enthusiasm or get discouraged because they don't see a radical change in 1 month or a radical change in 2 months. It takes a little time for your marketing system to start putting money in your bank account. The marketing system will attract potential customers who become good quality estimates, which become contracts that then get built. And the profit from that marketing improvement might not be realized for a year when you've finished all those jobs. There's that. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to be discouraged when you don't achieve immediate results. But the coaching and the peer groups can help people stay on track and give them support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, it sounds like even with the right mindset, which maybe a lot of people are lacking the right knowledge, the right mindset. Even with those things, it takes a good amount of patience as you implement and just kind of, wait to see the fruits of your labor, because it takes time for things to grow. And the last question here, if you could go back and give a single piece of advice to your younger self the day you officially registered your business, what would it be?
That's funny. Yeah, that's a funny story. The day we registered our business, we had to do it. It was like a paper application we had to do at a government office. And we had to do research in this microfilms. Like it feels like the dark ages thinking about that now. That's funny. If I could do something differently then, it would be to hire somebody or work for somebody who knows what they're doing. Like we started with nothing and no experience and no knowledge. And it was just, we went into it blindly and it was fun and we didn't even realize what we were missing. But if we had worked with somebody with experience, if we had worked with somebody who knew what they were doing, or if one of our early hires, instead of being one of our neighbors and friends that we were at school with, if we had hired a professional landscaper, I think we would have learned a lot of our lessons earlier. We would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. The first consultant we hired, we were in business for 12 years before we hired our first consultant, 12 or 13 years. Again, we didn't know that consultants were an option for us. We were a small company. And if we had known what that person could do for us, we might have hired them sooner. We joined Landscape Ontario after being in business for 10 years. Again, the resources available to us through Landscape Ontario were unknown to us until we joined. And in hindsight, we could have benefited from those lessons and from that networking a lot sooner. So I would say be more open to networking, support, advice, and there are a lot of people who have been through what you're about to go through, and talk to them before you try it.
Okay, great. All right, so that's it for my questions today, and it was great getting your perspective and your story.
Yeah.
Your 40 years. So
yeah.
thanks.
No, it is fun. It's fun to sort of take a walk down memory lane there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.